Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Databeers tonight. Thank the organizer for inviting me. My name is Laura. I'm a PhD student at City University of London. I study human behavior in a maths department. So what does it mean? It means that we ask ourselves questions that sociologists, behavioral scientists, economists would ask. And we try to answer using tools that come from maths. So mathematical models and, of course, a lot of data. So my data story tonight starts with my own data. So one day, I downloaded my location data from my phone. I plotted it on a map. And I was pretty surprised to see that, well, actually, I've explored a lot of places in London. Look at how many pins I have on this map, how many places I've been to. And then I digged a bit more into that. And I checked what are the places where I spent 95% of my time. And this boils down to a very small subset of locations. And I thought, wow, my life is super boring. And actually, of course, among these places, there is my work, my home place, my favorite bar, my friend's place, and so on. And then, actually, I remember what I studied about human mobility behavior, and I thought, OK, I'm not so strange, because we are all boring. So what basically science have said so far concerning mobility, and these are very important studies that appeared in big journals, is that our mobility behavior can be explained by looking at a very small subset of locations that, in a technical term, we call the activity space, where we spend most of our times, and places where we return very regularly and predictably. OK, but then I thought a bit of my life in the past, and I thought, OK, a few years ago, I lived back in Italy, and then I moved to France, and then I moved to Italy. I was like flying and moving between different places. How does this picture we have of mobility behavior describes myself moving between different countries? Actually, the picture we have is definitely not enough to explain it, as I found out later. And I discussed this with Andrea, who, as he mentioned, is my collaborator and supervisor. And he said, yeah, you don't even have to think about big moving, but let's think of simple things in our life. So there was a pub where we used to go too close to university, and we used to go on Friday from time to time. We really liked it after work. And then one day we tried a new pub. We explored a new pub, which is also around the university, and we found they have a much better burger there. And so since then, we started going to this new pub, and we kind of like leave the old pub, and we don't go to there anymore. So, OK, we want to describe mobility taking into account not only this like returning to favorite places type of behavior, but also what's the importance of exploration. And to do so, we needed to switch from what was like a snapshot-like understanding to a long-term description of behavior. And to do so, we need like super cool data that describes mobility behavior of individuals across different years. So we were lucky because among our collaborators, there is Sune Lehmann, who is someone who has run an incredibly cool experiment in Copenhagen and has this fantastic data set that we use to provide the results I will show you. So 1,000 students were handed phones on their first day of university, and they held these phones for 2 years, and their mobility trajectories were tracked for over 2 years with super high spatial and temporal resolutions. So the first question we ask ourselves is it just us who keeps exploring, or does everyone explore? And when we count the number of locations that individuals know across time, we find out that all individuals in this experiment keep exploring and seeing new places all the time. So another question is, what are the implications of this? How does this affect this activity space of location we know characterizes everyone? And we played a game. We thought, OK, let's take this activity space of an individual today. Let's take the activity space of that same individual in 1 year and in 2 years. How is it different from the way it is today? And we find out there is a decrease in the similarity between the activity space 1 year and 2 years and today, meaning that basically this activity space is continuously evolving. We're always changing our location. So basically, in 1 year time, on average, this individual will only hold about 25% of the locations that he constantly visits today. OK, so does this activity space expand, or does it shrink? we looked at the size of the activity space over time, and we found that all of us are characterized by a specific spatial capacity. So a given number of places where we regularly go to, and it doesn't change over time. And for the population that we studied, this spatial capacity is peaked at 25. So these individuals all visit about 25 locations in their routine. Okay, so another way to see this is that basically whenever a new location is introduced in my activity space, I may leave a location. So if I find a new restaurant that I really like, and I start going regularly to this new restaurant, I'm very likely to drop a restaurant where I was going before. Okay, this is super cool, but I'm sure that most of us are asking themselves, okay, but this is a subset of students, right? So they, of course, have a very special type of behavior because they're young and they want to explore new places and so on. So we also thought of this, and we thought of looking for more data. And we looked at data from other experiments, so one more experiment from Switzerland, one more experiment from Boston, and finally we got a collaboration with Sony Mobile, and we find these incredible data sets of 40,000 individuals, and we looked at their mobility trajectory, and we find that for all the data sets we looked at, no matter how old were the individuals involved, what was their gender, and so on, all the results I talked to you about hold. So they are all characterized by this limited spatial capacity that constrains their mobility behavior. And another final important finding is that the way we can explain the differences in spatial capacity is by looking at how people interact with each other. So the more friends they have, the more they're social, and the more the larger is their spatial capacity. So, okay, why is this important? Why do we care about this? Of course, I have no time to tell you in details what are the implications of what we're doing, but the idea is that on the one hand, we want to get a more theoretical understanding of why is this the case. Why are we limited in our mobility behavior? Is there some sort of cognitive constraints or evolutionary process that led us to have this limit today? And on the other hand, we want, on the more practical side, to be able to predict mobility behavior in a better way. We want to be able to predict trajectory, because this is useful in many different situations. And therefore, having a better understanding of how mobility routines change over the long term will help us design better models. So thank you very much for listening to this talk today. I'm very happy to take questions. I would like to thank all my collaborators. Thank you.